Welcome back to the Cakers channel. Are you a person that loves to see cake decorating or enjoy baking? If that's you and you want to learn a lot of cool new techniques, please watch this video from start to finish to see how I decorated this amazing two-tiered cake. This is delicious. This cake has a 10-inch base and an 8-inch top, and we started off by filling and crumb coating the 10-inch base. You may be wondering why the bottom bit is already covered. I actually removed some layers I had on the cake and replaced them with some other layers because I wasn't very happy with them, and I always put my best to work out. And that's the reason why I took that layer off and put away the rest and got some new cake layers to fill and stack the bottom tier with. So these are 10-inch round red velvet cakes, and I'm filling with my very delicious Swiss buttercream, and I'm crumb coating it as I go along. First, thin layer of buttercream that you put on the cake to trap all of that crumb, so when you go on to applying your second layer of buttercream, it will be crumb free. It's very important to chill your cakes between each stage of decorating it. So once I'm done applying this crumb coat and get it as neat as I can at this stage, I'm going to pop the cake in the refrigerator for like 30 minutes to let this layer of buttercream firm up. If you have freezer space, you can pop it in the freezer for like 10 minutes, and then you can move on to applying your second layer of buttercream. I already filled, stack and crumb coated my 8-inch cake layers. So this is 4 layers of 8-inch round red velvet cake. I applied my crumb coat and I set it in the fridge, and now I'm creating those nice sharp edges. That's a leveling tool that I'm using just to be sure that my cake is sitting nice and level. This is very important, guys. Whenever you're working on tiered cakes, it's very important to make sure that your cakes are leveled. If they are not sitting straight, when you're ready to stack them on each other, you're gonna have some difficulty. So that little leveling tool is a great addition to your cake decorating tools. All right, now while the cakes are in the fridge, firming up, I'm going to be coloring some fondant. The fondant that we're using today is called the Renshaw White Covering Paste. It's of very good quality. However, it can be a little bit too stretchy and can be a little difficult to work with sometimes. So even though I'm covering a cake with it, I'll add like a teaspoon of Tylose or CMC powder just to help it to firm up a little bit more and be a little easier to work with. I colored this fondant with some royal blue sugar flare color. It took almost a whole bottle of coloring, but the color was beautiful in the end, and it completely matched the color that the client wanted. I'm back onto the cakes now. I'm just applying a little bit of buttercream just to cover all those imperfections and get the cakes as nice and smooth as possible. To cover these beautiful cakes, we're going to be using the paneling method. The paneling method is when you cover the top of the cake first, and then you roll out a separate piece of fondant to wrap around the sides of the cake. I prefer to use this method because it's kind of a no-fail method for me. I prefer it a lot better than the blanket method, where you roll out a big piece of fondant and drape it over the entire cake. With that method, I tend to get a lot of elephant skin sometimes and tears in my fondant. And sometimes I have to strip the whole cake the whole cake off and start covering it again. So with this paneling method, I don't struggle with that, and I just love doing it. So we're going to be paneling both of these cakes, and that's what I'm doing. I'm covering the tops of the cakes. I sit them in the fridge for a few minutes when the tops are covered, and then I use my X-Acto blade to cut away the excess fondant from off the top, and then I'll roll out long pieces of fondant to cover the sides of the cakes. Before you start preparing the fondant for the sides of your cakes, it's very important to get like a little tape measure. I always have one in my kitchen, and I just use it to wrap around the cake and measure the exact height of the cake. So when I'm rolling my fondant to wrap around the sides of the cake, I will be sure that it's tall enough to cover the cake and wide enough to wrap all the way around the cake, with some bits of it overlapping for me to get that nice seamless finish around my cake. Once I'm happy with the height and the width of my fondant, I added some cornstarch to it to prevent it from sticking on itself while I'm rolling it on my rolling pin. And then I carefully roll it on my rolling pin and unroll it around my cake. As you can see there, I use a ruler to guide me as I'm cutting the fondant where it overlaps. And then I'm carefully joining the two bits together to create that nice seamless finish at the back of the cake. Now we're just using a fondant smoother and some cornstarch to just get the fondant as neat as possible on the cake, using my X-Acto blade to pop any tiny air pockets that's underneath the fondant. If you leave those air pockets, guys, they will just expand and ruin your whole hard work. So just take your time, as much time as needed, to carefully go around that cake, pop all of those tiny air pockets, and smooth your fondant out as best as possible. I'm now going to use this diamond impression mat. I bought this impression mat from Amazon. I'll link below my Amazon storefront where I have almost everything that I use in my cake decorating videos. So you can check out my Amazon storefront at your convenience. Remember, if you do shop in my storefront, I get a small commission, alright? So now, once I'm done putting in those impressions with that impression tool, it wasn't wide enough to cover the entire cake. So I'm just using a ruler to just go over those lines and make the indents a little deeper and extend it to the full height of the cake. Most of the work on the top tier is all done, and now we're back on working onto that bottom tier 10-inch cake. I'm doing the same thing. I'm measuring the height of the cake. This is a very wide cake though, and because I'm going to be applying some ruffled fondant effect all the way over this bottom tier, it wasn't important to me to stress myself too much to cover the whole width of the cake in one go. So I'm just applying the fondant around the side of this cake in small sections that I can manage. All these ruffles that will go on the cake will cover up all these seams, so no one will be seeing them. Once I'm done applying the fondant all the way around the cake, I'm going to be using my X-Acto blade to cut off all the excess fondant and get that nice and neat. Now, this is the top tier that I had in the fridge. I'm now using my X-Acto blade to cut off the excess fondant from the top of the cake to make it nice and neat. This is the same cake that we put the diamond impressions in. This is my steamer. It's a PME annealed steamer that I use to get rid of the cornstarch residue that's on the cake. It will just make it nice and shiny. The shine will go away, but it get rid of the cornstarch. Back again on the bottom tier. This is me cutting out some circles and using my fondant ball tool and my fondant mat to create those ruffled edges. I'm using my steamer to steam the cake as I go along to make it sticky so I can easily stick on those circled ruffles. Guys, I cut about 300 ruffles. Like, I was cutting ruffles all night. These ruffled effects take a whole lot of time, but they're absolutely beautiful. So whenever you're making these cakes, guys, with all of these ruffles, you have to take the time into consideration when doing that, okay? Once the ruffles are all done, I use a little tweezer to one by one put on those little pearl sprinkles at the intersection of all of those diamond patterns. Now I'm inserting dowels into my cakes. This is very important. This is the internal support and structure for the cake that's going on top. I'm putting an 8-inch cake on top, so I have about 8 very strong PVC dowels underneath that cake, and my 8-inch cake is on an 8-inch cake board. It's a very heavy cake, so that internal support is very, very important. I went ahead and added a beautiful finishing touch of that rhinestone strip of ribbon around the base of the 8-inch cake. I put on a nice golden topper that was provided by the client, and this is the beautiful cake. My client was absolutely amazed with her cake. The cake exactly matched the celebrant dress, and they enjoyed it. If you did learn from this video, please let me know what you learned in the comment section. And if you weren't clear on anything, please ask your questions. I'm always happy to answer them. Remember to like this video, share with your friends and family, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Until next time, keep on baking.